You're here. Welcome to the Masterminding Success podcast. They say if you want to be successful in business and in life, then surround yourself with successful people. So pull up a seat. The mastermind is about to begin.
Hey, glad you could join us for another episode of the Masterminding Success podcast. We're your host, Keith Wheeler.
And Nuria Colby.
And what are we talking about today, Nuria?
Today, we're going to talk about ramping up for Q4. So all about what we're going to do for quarter four. Have you got any plans or have you started ramping up for quarter four?
I actually started creating things specifically for quarter four earlier in the year, like around the summertime. And I think we actually had an episode back then that we talked about planning for Q4. But yeah, now Q4 is right around the corner, and it's like it's not time to plan for it now. Now it's time to do if you haven't already, and if you have, then if you plan on knocking out anything else, this is when to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think in my case, I don't think I do anything specifically for Q4 now. What I do is I do things for Q4 throughout the year, because I always think any book that I put up is going to be there for quarter four,
right? And
that will help. So obviously everything that goes on your inventory onto your bookshelf is stuff that people can look at during Q4. So the more, I guess, not that I'm saying quantity is important, but quality and quantity do matter when it comes to quarter four, because you're giving people more choice, basically. And I think I don't do anything specific anymore. I used to when I first started, but I kind of have it in the back of my mind throughout the whole year. And the one thing that I do now is if I've got something that's halfway finished or not quite finished, I do speed up the process a little bit, because I want to get it ready in time for Q4. And Q4, I don't know what you think about it, but some people say you should put your books out just before Q4, because then you get that honeymoon period that Amazon give you and they promote it more. And some people say, no, you should just put it out whenever. And I tend to agree with that view. I tend to agree, just put it out whenever. The minute you put it out, you can promote it, you can do anything, and it will still be there for quarter four. But I don't know what you think about that. How do you feel about it? Should you get things out as soon as they're ready or wait for a certain time?
I definitely, I've heard people say, to wait until kind of like the last minute and then, launch it in October or November. So you get that, that 30 days when it's first launched that you get, where it ends up on the new releases and things like that. And I've heard that, and I've heard that's very successful. I typically create projects, and when I create them, I don't sit on anything. I want to get it done, and so I'm kind of like what you were saying is I'm always thinking of Q4 in the back of my mind, but I don't say, okay, I'm going to wait and save this for Q4. And there are a couple of reasons why. I think while yes, it's nice to have have it in the new releases, so it's an extra category that it's in, but the downside to that then is, like, if you launched it in, let's say, June or July, you now have 3 or 4 extra months that you can get reviews, extra months that you have sales, so the algorithm understands who your book is for. And so there are definitely pros and cons to both. I basically, at the beginning of either the end of the year or just at the beginning of the year, I usually plan out my year as far as what types of products I want to put out, and especially my written content, and kind of a release schedule. And so as I'm planning that out, I usually think a little bit more about Q4. So I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that this is done in time for Q4. So maybe I'll release that earlier as far as that's concerned. But once I'm actually working on the products or projects, it's really just a matter of I'm doing the best quality work I can, to get it out for my customer. And, the great thing is, even if, you've launched it in, January, February, very far from Q4, you can always run ads during Q4. And I would actually recommend running them prior to Q4, because during Q4, typically your ads will be more expensive because there's just more competition out there, and which is bringing up the cost. And we could do a whole nother episode on pricing methodology on ads. But yeah, so that's kind of the way I do it. Very similar to you.
Yeah, I think it's identical, actually. You mentioned all the things that I do as well. I just think, I don't know, Q4 for me is like a bonus almost to
Yeah.
your whole year. And I don't have strategies as such, like, publishing it just before so that you can take advantage of the honeymoon period. I don't really think about things like that, because to me, they are methods to give you a push. But then
Right.
I'm more for longevity. I prefer that my sales are more consistent throughout the year,
Agreed.
rather than giving it a push. And that's why I don't do book launches either. I don't really do anything special to launch any of my books, because I don't know, I just always think, well, I'm going to advertise anyway. And I just want it to be, I'm happy with consistency. If my books
Mm-hmm.
start selling consistently, I don't care if there are lots of books out there that I see that are like one-hit wonders. They suddenly
Right.
sell a lot, and then you see them dropping off the radar and you don't see them again. And
Mm-hmm.
my books are not that high in the rankings, but they are consistently selling. So I tend to go for that strategy rather than having a big impact and then nothing. I mean, if you can sustain it, if you can have that big launch and the big impact and then keep selling consistently, obviously so much the better. I haven't really thought about that too much. I just think at the moment it works, and I always think, if something's not broken, don't fix it. So
Right.
I just keep continuing doing it this way. I think the main thing I would say for me, Q4, is really the advertising. And you're right, it does cost a lot more money during Q4, but then you also get a lot more return for your money.
Right.
So I always say, I don't mind spending $100 if that means I earn 200. So it doesn't seem
Right.
like a lot. You think, oh wow, well, that's half of what you're earning is spent on ads. That's too much. To me, it's not. As long as you're making something extra, it makes sense to do that. I think, advertising, definitely. The summer months, for example, are very slow for me, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of scale down on the ads then, because I prefer to spend that extra money just before Q4 and during Q4. And then what I normally do, I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but when I go into my ads and I set a specific amount, for example, say $10 a day for
Right.
a particular book, and I find that normally it spends the $10 a day, and sometimes it spends less than $10 a day. That's fine.
Right.
During Q4, when I look at my ads, by midday, it has already spent that $10 a day. So then what I do is I go in and I increase the daily spend for the books that are selling, that are basically out of budget. And
Mm-hmm.
then because I know they're the ones that they're going to continue spending that budget. And also depends on how many sales I have. So I find that Q4 is not a time of creating, but a time of watching your ads.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I don't know
Yeah.
if you do that, but I don't know enough about ads. I know you know a lot more than me about them. I kind of work with what I do know and
Mm-hmm.
hope for the best, keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know how
Yeah.
to do that, but that's what I
I'll
tend to
see. Yeah, we could do a whole nother episode on ads, I'll tell you.
do.
But I mean, I agree. As long as your ads are being profitable, then I'll increase my ads. One thing that, and I know this episode isn't supposed to be about ads, but one thing to keep in mind when it comes to ads is never budget what you can't afford to lose. Because even if your ads are being profitable, KDP is not going to pay you for another, 30 days, 60 days, whatever. But Amazon ads, they're going to take their money out like now,
That's right.
so you need to make sure that you're not like robbing Peter to pay Paul, where you're not, you actually have the money in there to pay for those ads that you're spending. And I only say that because I've known people who knew that and still went against what I suggested, and they their ads were profitable, but now they couldn't pay their rent because Amazon was taking the money out now. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you're gonna make, you're gonna get all that money back and then some next month. But in the meantime, you're eating spaghetti and ramen noodles or whatever. You never want to put yourself in that position if you can avoid it. So that's one thing anytime I talk about ads, even if it's just in passing, I always make sure that I put that little disclaimer in there.
Yeah, that's a very important point, actually. And I remember that I didn't run ads for a very long time. I think I didn't run ads for a whole year because I just couldn't afford to run ads.
Yeah.
I wasn't selling that much. And what I was selling was basically just keeping me above water. And I thought, I can't afford to run ads.
Right.
And then the minute I could afford a little bit, I did. And I was very careful with that budget because, as you say, you only get paid 60 days after you've made those sales, but your ads money comes out straight away out of your bank. And in fact, I never know when it does come out because it can suddenly surprise me and, my money's come out. And other times it takes longer. So there doesn't seem to be a specific day or a specific period when your money comes out. Not that I've noticed anyway. So I can afford to run ads now in that way because of my earnings have gone up, and that's the only reason. So you made a really important point there, because that is something that can really unravel your whole business if you overspend on ads. And any money we make in Q4, we only really get into our accounts in February for the December earnings, which is the big one, really. So yeah, be careful with that. And watch your ads. I spent November and December especially just watching my ads. I don't do much else. Just because you have to be on the ball, and I run quite a lot of ads, so you have to look through each of them. But yeah, we'll have to do another episode just on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could probably do an episode just on Q4 ads. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And Q4 is when I do the least amount of creation of books for my business and any other projects that I'm working on, because I'm focusing on the ads, or just with the holidays I'm busy doing other stuff. But yeah, I definitely, it's funny because I do get quite a bit of sales, but my mentality is a lot like yours, where I mean, it's a nice to have. It's kind of a bonus at the end of the year, like you said. But for my business and for most people's business, I want more consistency. And so I want to make sure that I'm getting consistent, earnings throughout the year. And then I just get this nice little peak at the end of the year. But that's another reason why I don't just save everything up until the end of the year, because I do know people that do that mentality. That they literally create from January until September, and then in September and beyond they just start launching launching products and books every couple weeks or whatever, just to get so much Amazon love, if you will. But again, it's is that something that's sustainable for your business, or you're just going to get this nice chunk of change that you're going to have to budget the rest of your year?
I mean, there's different strategies, and I think everybody has to pick what works for them. And I know people that all throughout the year they're thinking of Halloween. I'll make a Halloween notebook, I'll make a Halloween coloring book, I'll make a Halloween this or the other. And to me, I mean, if it works for them, great. For me, that I don't think that would work, because Halloween is one day in the year. It's not like Christmas. Christmas is where people, they buy months in advance to spend on Christmas. But for Halloween, it's really a much more limited time span. And if I were to create lots and lots of books for Halloween, where does that leave me during the rest of the year? You know,
Yeah.
and once Halloween is finished, you know, there's only the next Halloween, which is fine. And if it gives you a really big spike before Halloween, then that's great. But I prefer to have evergreen books, really, that sell throughout the year. And then I'll have one or two for Halloween or
Right.
for Christmas or for Thanksgiving or whatever. But I tend to make, thinking about it now, I tend to make more evergreen books and they sell during Q4 anyway, because people, you have to remember that people buy books, they buy more books during Q4 because they're giving them as gifts.
Right.
And a book that you give as a gift doesn't have to be a specific theme. It doesn't have to be a Christmas gift because you're giving it as a gift for Christmas. It could be a novel. It could be a book on how to knit or how to, you know, because you're giving that to somebody who's interested in those subjects. So I think that for Q4, you know, seasonal things are great if they're Christmas related, but evergreen books sell just as well during that period. So
I would say about 90% of my products that I have are evergreen, and then maybe 10% are, you know, are these little, you know, seasonal type of things. And I think that's, I mean, like you said, everybody's business model is different, and you need to do what's best for you. I mean, obviously, if you're a writer and you write horror books, then knock out a bunch of Halloween stuff. You know, that would be perfect. You know, it would tie in. You know, but again, it really depends on your niche and your brand. And, you know, and again, we've talked about this before, but you can have multiple brands, you know, and so maybe for one of the brands that you work on, you do seasonal stuff, but for other ones you don't. And, you know, it's just, again, I don't like the peaks and valleys. I really don't. I want more consistent, you know, when you're first starting out, those peaks are nice and the valleys kind of suck, but you know, it might give you that drive to, okay, what, you know, working to get to that next peak. But I find if you really want to do this in, you know, over the long haul, that you really need more consistent sales. And so Q4 is great. And, you know, I will be more than happy to, I'm still going to run ads in Q4 and before, so that way I do make the most of the sales that I get in Q4, but I don't let Q4 drive my entire year. You know, that's one reason why, again, I plan out my year ahead of time. And it also helps keep me in check to make sure that I stay in line, because I'm a procrastinator at heart. And so it doesn't take long for me and doesn't take much for me to get distracted and see the next shiny object. And which shiny object syndrome, we did a whole episode on that. But you know, it doesn't take much for me to get off track. And so having that guide, and, you know, always looking for, okay, I need to make sure I stay on topic, and that I, you know, get these books done within a certain amount of time. I do have one book currently, one written book that needs to be published before Q4. And that's my nonfiction book that I'm basically almost done with. I just need to do one more round of editing. But that's taken me longer because I have gotten, you know, off track working on other projects. And so, Q4 is definitely something that is literally right around the corner. So if you do want to publish something or create something, and you want to take advantage of the increased purchasing that happens around the holidays in Q4, then it's not too late. You know, there are definitely positives for people that do wait, you know, like we talked about, where, you know, if you launch it for the first 30 days that your book is live, it does get into Amazon's new releases. So that's more visibility that you might get. But again, it's, you know, if you think it's too late, you don't have time to put something out, just remember there's another Q4 next year. And this is something that we're, you know, again, if you're doing it for the long haul, you know, that's another realization that I had early on, which is, you know, if my Q4 wasn't that great, there's always next Q4.
That's true. Yeah. And just a quick tip for anybody who maybe hasn't got time to create more books for Q4, the other thing that you can do now, which could really help your sales during Q4, is to do your A+ content.
Yes.
And I keep saying that. I keep saying A+ content is so important. And I don't know why so many books don't have A+ content, because when I look on Amazon, there's lots of my competitors that haven't got A+. And I think it really makes you stand out if you do that, especially if you show more pictures of your book, the inside of your book, show people holding your book, that kind of thing. It just makes a big difference. It looks more professional. And I think some people are really missing a trick there. I know it's not easy sometimes to put on all the A+ content, and it takes time, but it can make a big difference. So if you're not making any more books, I would suggest that is one of the things that you can do that can boost your sales as well.
So yeah, I agree completely. You know, A+ content can make a huge difference. And there's we can do a whole nother, like I said, a whole nother episode on it, so I'm not gonna belabor that too much. But yeah, I mean, and I'll be honest, a lot of my books don't have A+ content.
Oh, mine too.
It's funny. I did I actually was talking with my virtual assistant, and I was showing him what A+ content was, and I had to pull up like 10 different books before I pulled up one that had A+ content.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this one doesn't have it either. Oh, this one doesn't have it either. And yeah, it really surprised me at how many books out there don't have it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that there's people out there that have this mentality where they publish and pray. You know, they publish their book one time, that's it. They don't promote it, and they just move on to the next book. And so they don't go back and check their keywords. They don't go back and you know, update the interior or update the categories or update the A+ content. And so and that's fine. I mean, if their business is always moving forward, that's what they want to do, that's fine. My mentality of that is, well, then don't complain when those older books don't sell. You know, if you haven't given them any love in the last 3 years, then don't expect them to give you any love back. So it is an ongoing business, just like any business. You know, if you're creating product, I mean, that's why, you know, people, you know, whether it's a shoe store or whatever, they're always coming out with something new, but many times they bring back old stuff that, you know, that they knew wasn't good then, you know, wasn't as good as it could be. And that's the great thing, is I'm always learning. I mean, I've been doing this for almost a decade now, and I'm always learning in this business. And so there are definitely books that I published, you know, in the beginning that I could do a way better version of now. So what do? I do a way better version of it. Am I competing with my own book? Technically, yeah. But whichever one wins, I still win.
Exactly.
You know? And so I just make sure that I make it clear what the differences are in the new version. But yeah, so I hope people have learned something about Q4, learned that most importantly, there's not just one way, you know. Even though Nuri and I do things very similar, doesn't mean that's the only way. I mean, I think we've brought up some really good alternatives. It's not too late to create projects and put them out in Q4. I mean, I've known people who don't publish until later in November, and they still get sales in Q4. So, I mean, there's no one way to, you know, to see success. It's just something that I always suggest, even if you decide that you don't care about Q4 and you want to ignore Q4, you still need to know about Q4, know why people make a big deal about it. If nothing else, if you want nothing to do with it, at least you know, hey, well, then I'm not going to run ads in Q4 because that's just going to bump up the price of my ads, and I don't care about the Q4 sales. So why would I run ads during that time? You know, let's wait until January or February and I can run ads that time.
Yeah. And I think also the one curious thing is, for me, Q4 really kicks in the day after Thanksgiving. I don't know if that's the same for you, but
it is.
You know, nothing much is happening, and you think, this year Q4 is really falling flat. And I think that every year. I keep hoping for that. I keep thinking, oh no, it's not going to work.
Not this year. Yeah.
Thanksgiving, bang, all the orders are coming in, and then I think, oh yeah, that happened last year.
And the year before, and the year before.
And I always forget.
Yeah.
I know this year.
Yeah. Until the time comes, because you're so excited for Q4. It's like, I mean, no pun intended, it's like Christmas, it's you get super excited about it, and then you're like, waiting for those and then you're like, oh, it's not gonna be as good as it was last year. That's okay. I can deal with it. It's fine. And they're like, oh wait, yeah, it is.
Yeah,
And so hopefully if this will be your first Q4, and you start getting that, it's the middle of November, and you start feeling, well, I don't know what Keith and Nuri are talking about. There's nothing different now. If anything, it's actually slower. Just know that and obviously we can't make any promises, but typically across the board, regardless of what niche you're in, I don't know of anybody who has not seen at least some kind of spike around the holidays. So,
and also it takes time. I always say
it
that
does.
to people. It's going to take time. If you're just starting now, you can see a spike for Q4, but it won't be as big as next year's and the
Right.
year after that. The longer you're doing this, the better it will get. First of all, because you've got more books out there, but also mainly because you're getting better at doing
Right.
books. When you're first starting, what I just said about A+ content and all that, it's not something you think about when you're first starting. The only thing you're worried about is getting a book published, and it's a big deal when you do. And then as you go on, as the months go by, and I don't count it in days or weeks, it's definitely months that you need to wait for you to get better at your job.
Oh, absolutely.
That's when you see the difference, and every Q4 will be better and better and better. It just takes a long time, and I just wanted to say that because I don't want people to expect too much too soon, because it doesn't happen like that. But it's lovely when you've been doing it for a while. Every Q4 that comes, you know it's going to be better than the last. So that's my hope for everyone anyway.
I agree.
Yeah.
This has been another great mastermind, Nuria. Once again, a huge thank you to all our listeners and viewers who came to tag along. If you enjoyed today's mastermind, please consider following or subscribing to the podcast, and maybe even leave us a review and let us know what you thought. Until next week, I'm Keith Wheeler.
And I'm Nuria Colby.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining the Mastermind today. Be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice and tell a friend who would enjoy it too. Your support is greatly appreciated. This has been the Masterminding Success Podcast.